up your engine! Today I'm going to show you why you should not drive your car through water. Using this 2014 Dodge Challenger with a V6 engine as a prime example. Now, we recently had a tropical storm come in, threw a bunch of water in Houston. Unfortunately, this woman drove through the water. She said it didn't look that deep, but the car started acting up. She should have watched my video beforehand. One, don't go through the water, and two, if you do, shut the car off immediately. Do not try running it. Because the air we breathe compresses quite a bit inside an engine. Compresses, fuel sprayed in it, it ignites. If water gets sucked into that mix, the water compresses a very tiny amount, but not much. So if you suck a bunch of water, when the piston goes up, instead of squishing air, it can't squish the water much. So what happens is, it bends the connecting rod on the piston that goes to the crank. Once it's bent, the engine starts running funky. So, the first thing you do, check this. Open the hood. Check the air filter. In this case, the air filter is sopping wet. This baby sucked water into the engine. You don't want to run an engine that way. You want to take this plastic crap off and check the spark plugs. Because if you're lucky, the water's in the engine and it hasn't compressed yet. Get this out of the way. You can see water's coming out. Not a good thing. We're going to pull the spark plugs out. 3 on each side. First we take off the coil. Take the coil off. Unbolt it. Pull it out. And remove a spark plug. Take all the spark plugs out. You sure make them long. Out it comes. And it smells. Plus it's wet. Remove all 6 spark plugs. That one's wet too. And before we crank it over, we're going to check the engine oil. We'll stick it in, see if water's intruded inside the engine. And it has, because it's overfilled. And I do have to say, in this case, I don't have much hope, because unfortunately, she drove through the water and kept driving until it died. Generally then, the rods are going to be bent from water getting inside and collapsing. It got deep enough that not only did it suck water into the pistons, but it sucked water into the engine oil too. So this thing just went too deep in water. That's a disadvantage of a low-to-the-ground car. They go faster, less drag, they look cool, but if you take out the air filter and see where the air is being sucked from, it's being sucked from way down low, way in here, way down low. It's a racing thing for speed. Race cars do that too. This one went through floodwaters, and sad but true, it's probably a losing effort. But after changing the oil, let's crank the engine over. See what it does. If it hadn't been run at all, we could push the water out of the holes by cranking it. Let's see what happens. Now, unfortunately, the only thing we really see coming out is air and a little bit of fuel that's being sprayed into the cylinders. It hadn't been run after it went through the water. The water could have gotten into the air filter and on the intake, but not sucked into the engine. And then tons of water would shoot out while we're cranking it. Didn't really come out, so odds are this thing has been damaged. Let's put it back together and see what happens. You can see there's still water in here, so we're not going to put that back on. We're going to leave that off. Spark plugs back in, get them nice and snug. Now we'll put the ignition coils back on. You want to get them on tight so they're grounded. Now we're going to crank it up and see what happens. That horrible knocking noise you hear is rod knock. The engine's been destroyed by water. Now in this case, there's no sense in going further. Who knows? The computers might be ruined from getting wet and stuff, but she said the water wasn't that deep. It doesn't need to be that deep to suck water in the engine and ruin it. And that's because, as I said previously, air compresses quite a bit, but water, only a tiny amount. So when you get a bunch of water in the cylinder, when it fills up, and then it goes up for the firing event, the piston has to compress it, and it's got to go a certain distance. If that's full of water, it can't go the whole distance. So instead of going the whole distance, what it does is it bends the piston rod. Now, if it's really bad, sometimes it'll actually crack the block and do even more damage. But in this case, the engine's toast and would need a complete rebuild. At least it's a 3-liter VVT. the V6 engine. The Hemi engines are very popular. All the kids want them, the racers want them. These V6s, not so popular. So, if she can find a used one in a junkyard from a wreck, she could have that installed. Now, I had a customer do that a couple years ago. They spent about $1,400 for the engine and labor at a junkyard. Most mechanics are going to charge a lot more than that. But if she can find a junkyard that'll sell and install an engine, that's what I'm going to advise her to do. She owes so much money out now. If she would have had full coverage, hey, that water came up, the insurance company would pay for the damage. She did not have the coverage. It's coming out of her pocket. So she's either going to lose a ton in what she owes for this or put a used engine in it. And so what's the moral of this story? You might think the water's not that deep because your air filter's up here, but in this case, the intake is way down there. As you can see, it doesn't take that much water to suck in. Then it's goodbye engine. And it's all because air compresses a lot. Engines are actually giant air pumps. They suck air in, they pump it out as fast as they can. But unfortunately, they are not water pumps. You do not want water sucked into the engine and blown out, because that will bend the piston rods at a minimum. Destroy an engine that was otherwise running perfectly fine. Hope that a junkyard's got a decent engine, sell it at a decent price. Pray it doesn't go through any water that's just even that deep anymore. When it really starts raining, you got a low racing car like this sucking air from the bottom, you don't want to drive through it. That's why you see guys with those Jeeps, they put big snorkels that go up to the top, and that's where the air sucked in. And of course, even they're gambling it doesn't get too deep to suck water into the engine and into the transmission. A lot of those are diesels, and they work differently. Since they don't have an ignition source, they can run in water quite well. A lot of tanks can go underwater with a snorkel. But cars, not so much, especially if you got a gasoline engine with an intake duct low. See these fake air intakes? You open the hood, they don't go anywhere. They're just for show. And as I've already shown, this baby's sucking the air from way down here. Low. Not a good thing when you're driving in the rain. So the next time it starts raining cats and dogs, head for the high ground like Scotty does. Do not try to drive your way through it in a modern car. And here's some bonus questions and answers. Caveman Luke says, hey Scotty, I got a 2016 Dodge Journey. Carvana's offered me 10.5 grand and I owe 11. Now, unfortunately, I can afford a Highlander or a Pilot. My wife doesn't like the RAV4. It leaves me with a Sorento, Santa Fe, or Ford Edge. They're all 2016 to 18 with V6 engine. Which would be better? I would say just get an older Toyota or an older Honda myself. But you're trying to upgrade from a Journey. Just about anything is an upgrade from a Journey. I'm amazed that they're even offering you 10.5 grand for that thing. Out of those two, I'd buy the Sorento Santa Fe. The Ford Edge, those V6 engines, they're going to be EcoBoost engines. They don't hold up. They got those stupid water pumps that are chain driven, that when they break, they can destroy the engine. Realize they don't last forever, but generally, they'll last at least 100,000 miles, relatively trouble-free with the Sorento Santa Fe. So, what the heck? I mean, you might go that way. I would just buy an older Toyota or Honda myself, because they're much better made. But if push comes to shove, and you got to get one of those, don't get the Ford, not with that engine. James 73 says, I got an 02 Toyota Camry. It stalls every once in a while, and it has the trouble code P101. I replaced the mass air sensor, and it made no difference. Help. Make your car run better with a little spray cleaner. I fixed one 6 months ago with the same exact problem. Turns out your throttle, the throttle plate opens and closes. Well, when it closes, there's only a little gap. And that little gap, carbon will build up over time. Then it'll give the wrong data. It'll always trip that P0101 code. So if you do my video and spend a lot of time cleaning the throttle, you'll know. When you take off the big air ducts, there's the air filter, take that off, and the duct going to the engine. Where the duct goes onto the engine, that's where the throttle is. You'll see the big throttle plate inside. The video explains it all. It's real easy to do. But you'll probably see, if you get a flashlight and look in there, it's probably all black with built-up carbon, and then it'll stick. And when you use the throttle spray cleaner to clean it, that'll fix your whole problem. Now, when you're done, it'll idle weird for a day or two as it sets itself back up. But you probably find that'll fix the whole thing, because I have fixed literally hundreds of Toyotas that way over the years just by cleaning the carbon off of the throttle plate. I mean, geez, the thing's 19 years old, and it gets dirty, and maybe it's never been cleaned. You only need to clean it once every couple of years, maybe. But it's been 19 years, it's probably never been touched. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.